to look at this applicant for who she was,
I'm going to go into the field of thanatology, and I said, great.
So first, we try to maintain them there.
Or reimagined view. And child development doesn't happen.
Part though is if that hose that runs from
dealers who take too many children, or
same woman who months before the agency said, I think we might be moving.
What would happen if we asked every family, what do you need? If we asked parents, what do you need in order to keep your child safely home with you? If we asked them, what do you need in order for your child to return safely to your care? And what if we asked children, what do you need in order to feel safe if you were to go home? Or dare I say, should we ask, how can I help? What do you think would happen? Well, I was able to pose that question. I was designing a model permanency part in a local jurisdiction where I got to serve as judicial officer. And I asked just that question. I said, I want to ask every family that comes in, what do you need? And I got some interesting responses. From the agency, I was told that it wasn't necessary because they were already coming in with a services plan for the family. From the Parents' Council, I was told it was probably not a great idea to do because parents were going to be resistant. They weren't going to engage with me, and they might even leave. And one council even suggested that one might wave their favorite finger at me on their way out the door. So what do you think happened? They talked. The parents talked. Nobody was angry that I was asking them what they needed. They felt heard and they felt respected. And they talked. They talked about their lives. They talked about their children. They talked about their challenges. It was great. They talked. And we listened. And we tried to listen. What didn't they say? Not one family said to me, I need those 4 or 5 services that we know get given to every family that comes into contact with the child welfare system. They didn't say that. And I'm not saying that those are bad services. I'm not. What I'm saying is they're not right for every family. And many families need much more than those services in order to be successful. People don't think in the way of what they need as services. They don't think that way. They think about the conditions of their environment. They think about their relationships, positive and negative. They think about behaviors. They think about their own behaviors. They think about the behaviors of others that contributed to where they are today. And that's how they think. So that's what you're going to hear. And it's very different to hear things in that way. So it sounds simple enough, right? And yeah, it's simple. It's simple to ask a question, what do you need? But simple's not always easy. And this is definitely not easy. And why isn't it easy? It's not easy because we're human. Right? We're human. And what does it mean to be human? It means that we don't like to talk about things that necessarily make us uncomfortable. And as humans, if somebody's reaching out for help, we want to be able to help. We want to be able to fix it. And if we don't know what people are going to say back to us, we don't know if we're going to be able to fix it. And that causes us a level of discomfort. But to those concerns, I say to you, is it enough? Is it enough to have made those standard referrals for those 4 to 5 services in order to satisfy reasonable efforts requirements? Or does it require that something more? Does it require that we ask the question about needs and that we're responsive to those needs? I would say it does. And I would say anything less is not reasonable. So what are we really talking about here? We're talking about engagement. Right? And we're talking about engagement as a path to true reasonable efforts. And there's a lot of engagement buzz right now. It's kind of like just become a term that we throw around a lot. And I will tell you, part of my work is within the CFSR unit for the Federal Children's Bureau. And so I've looked at a lot of approved PIPs. And I can say confidently that the vast majority of approved PIPs have a child welfare agency strategy that deals with engagement by the caseworkers with families. There's also some strategies, although quite a few less, that deal with the legal and judicial systems engagement with strategies. Well, what I can tell you is that all of those strategies are tools. They're tools, they're policies, they're bench cards, they're programs, and I think that's a good start. It's a great start. And there's legal and judicial research that's emerging on quality hearings that some of the main engagement tactics, calling people by their names, asking them if they have any questions, directly communicating with them, and explaining the hearing process, those engagement tactics are showing relationships to positive outcomes for families, especially around reunification. And I think that's really exciting. So have I convinced you to ask the question? I know there's some of you that are still asking. You're saying, really, is asking a question going to get to that interaction that I'm looking for people to respond to me in an open, honest, and thoughtful way? Maybe, maybe not. I want you to think about something that we've all experienced. And let's look at multiple roles. Let's look at a group of caseworkers that were just given a brand new assessment tool and a colloquy to support the use of that tool. Lots of training around that. Let's think about a group of lawyers who have just all been trained around a new standard of practice for representing parents or representing children. Or a group of judges who all just got a shiny new bench card and they're all going to implement it on the same hearing at the same point in the case. Think about all those groups. What do you routinely see when that happens? That some of these professionals repeatedly and consistently see better outcomes than others. And I've talked to people about that. Why is that? Why do you think that that happens? And I hear things like, well, they're just really good. Like you can just tell they're really, really good. I don't know, they just got that something going on. You know, they don't really put anything tangible to what that is going on. But what I would say is this. Really pay attention. Pay attention to what they're doing with those tools, with that card, with those policies. I've been asked a lot to view and observe those really good players, right? I want you to go and sit in that court and watch that judge because that judge is really good. And what I observe when I do that, and they're right, usually when they're asking me to see it, that judge is really good. That caseworker is spot on. And what I'm noticing is that there's empathy and a deep understanding of trauma. And those are at play when they're using the tools that have been given to them. So what is that? We already said we were talking about engagement earlier. This is really taking engagement and moving a level up. This is really about authentic engagement. Not just using those tools, but using them in a way that is supportive to families, that families feel respected, they feel heard, they feel like they have a voice and often a choice into what's happening. If you'll allow me to just be cliche for a minute in making this point a little further, I see it more as like the difference between a science and an art. I see the science of engagement are those tools, those policies, those protocols, the things that are written, the question, right? The question is a science. What do you need? The art is different. For the art, we recognize that we have to connect on a very basic human level with people. We've learned and we understand about trauma, and we're empathetic to people's situations, either the situation that they're in now or the situation that they've lived their life that brought them to the situation that they're in now. That's really very important to practice the art of engagement. Some people will say, well, that an art is a talent. It's not something that can be learned. Well, I challenge that when it comes to authentic engagement. I think you can learn I think you can absolutely be a learner. There's a lot of information out there on the web about empathy. And I promise you won't have to go to page 2 of Google for it. You can Google once, you'll get the definition, and then you'll get a page of resources that you can look at and think more critically about your own ability to be empathetic. I think that's really very important. And there's certainly an abundance of education available to start thinking and learning about trauma in the child welfare system. So if you'll allow me a moment, I'd like to go even deeper. We've talked about engagement, asking the question, what do people need? We've talked about authentic engagement, using your empathy and connecting with those people when you're asking that question. But we need to go a little deeper. We need to be active listeners. When we ask that question, even if we ask it in an engaging way, if they say things to us and we haven't listened to what they're saying, we're still not being helpful, we're not being respectful. We need to be active listeners. And when we're active listeners, we need to respond with something that's going to help this family. And please, hear me, that response is not necessarily services. Could be, but it'll go much beyond that when you're really listening. So I want to share an experience that I had that gets to the heart of what I'm talking about, what they might say, and this need to actively listen and then respond appropriately. In that model part that I presided over, we had a case that came in. It was a case, mom was Diana, child was Emma. Emma was a toddler, and the allegations were neglect in that mom kept Emma restrained in car seat, pack and play, whatever it was, for hours and hours at a time, sometimes would forget to feed Emma, and the reason being was that she needed to clean her house. Okay, so I have Diana in front of me, and like I did on every case, I said, Diana, what do you need? And she looked at me, and she said, I need someone to clean my house. And this next part is what haunts me till today. I'd like to think I know a lot more now than I did then. I asked the question. I asked it with what I thought was authenticity. But when she said, I need someone to clean my house, that's nothing I'd ever heard before. And my response was, respectfully, politely, I don't think that that's something that we can provide to you. And the agency attorney nodded. And the parents' attorney, shook their head as well. And Diana went on to receive parenting classes, and she received a psychological evaluation and pretty intense therapy. And Diana got her child back after about 1.5 years. What haunts me is that if I had seen Diana today, I would have said, Diana, what's your support system? Who are your friends? Who are your neighbors? Who's your family? Can they help? Can they come in and maybe clean for you while you are interacting with your baby? Can they watch your baby while you clean on some days? Can they come into your home and maybe do something, clean your house, while you go out with the baby, right? So I wasn't going to be taking care of the problem just by doing that. I think she did need the psychotherapy to go along with it, but what I absolutely believe is that that would have created more opportunity for contact with the baby, which would have yielded that child coming home much sooner. And maybe if her support system was strong enough, I don't know, I didn't ask, maybe that baby didn't even need to be removed. So I want you to take away from that, when you seek input, you must respond with meaningful and thoughtful consideration. You must not assume that you know what's best and that the solutions are only in services. So please, always ask the question, become a student of authentic engagement, learn to be uncomfortable with the fact that you may not be able to give a quick fix. Listen actively, and only then will we make true, authentic, reasonable efforts that benefit families.
Two separate